Next up, we've got 7 in 67, and we're going to start with a band called Black Cat Bones. This band featured two guys that you'll know very well, Paul Kossoff and Simon Kirke. Both went off to being free. We lost Paul Kossoff very young, unfortunately. Simon Kirke, though, went on to be in Bad Company later on. Then we've got the first appearance of the Pink Floyd, as in the Pink Floyd. This is just after the release of Arnold Lane, and it's a couple of months away from the release of See Emily Play. I think there was a Top of the Pops appearance for Arnold Lane that Syd Barrett really didn't fancy singing, so Roger Waters stepped in. Their first album was going to be August of that year, 67. That was going to be called The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. The Floyds turned up with, I think, 6 really huge white bed sheets, and they had some oils, I think, and a projector, and a blowtorch, and some slides, and I think you know where I'm going here. This is the very famous UFO lights show. 10 years after, Alvin Lee named the band 10 years after because he was such a huge Elvis Presley fan. And when Alvin Lee started the band in 1966, it was 10 years after Elvis Presley had started in 1956. Then we got John Lee Hooker. He's the guy that took acoustic Delta Blues and plugged it in, turned it electric. Boom, 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 boom. Then we got the Tomorrow. Tomorrow featured Steve Howe on guitar. Steve Howe later of Yes, of course. Then we got the Bee Gees. The Bee Gees. The reason we know it's 67 for the Bee Gees is because they did their new single, as they said at the time, which was called New York Mining Disaster, 1941. We're going to finish off with Idle Race, with Jeff Lynne in their ranks at this point, writing songs. Jeff Lynne was only around for about another 18 months or so in Idle Race, and then he went off to form the Electric Light Orchestra with Roy Wood. Roy Wood was out of the move. It didn't really work out with Roy Wood and Jeff Lynne in the same band. There's a great story in Don Arden's book, Mr. Big, about Jeff Lynne and Roy Wood. The rest of ELO had come out on stage, and there was no Roy Wood and no Jeff Lynne. And Don Arden's going, what's this all about? So he goes into the dressing room and he finds Jeff Lynne and Roy Wood having a punch-up about who was going to go on second. It was a little bit like, this town ain't big enough for the both of us. So Roy Wood moved on and he went on to form Wizzard. And we're going to start with The Nice. The Nice featuring Keith Emerson on Hammond organ and knives. This was the night apparently that Keith Emerson kind of jammed the knives into the organ and then went for a little meet and greet around the audience, which is fine. But it was when he tried to get back on stage, there was a steward there saying, well, I can hear the keyboards, mate, so it can't be you. Eventually, though, Keith Emerson did make it back onto the stage and carried on. The knives were given to Keith Emerson by their roadie at the time, Lemmy. Next up, the Moody Blues. This is the Moody Blues in between kind of Denny Laine and Justin Hayward. I'm not sure which one it was. They were kind of in their Denny Hayward phase. Terry Reid. Terry Reid, probably best known for turning down Jimmy Page in sort of mid-68 when Jimmy Page and Peter Grant were putting Led Zeppelin together. And also turned down Deep Purple in 1969 when Ritchie Blackmore was putting Deep Purple Mark II together. Now, although I can't see Terry Reid in, being Ian Gillan in Deep Purple Mark II, I would have loved to have seen Terry Reid in Led Zeppelin. I might be on my own there. Just saying, Robert Plant, first and last and always, no problem. But Terry Reid, he's got a voice. If you don't believe me, check out his Isle of Wight 1970. Joe Cocker. Joe Cocker, this is slightly prior to him doing the cover of I Get By With a Little Help From My Friends, the Paul and John song. Then we've got The Who, the Who's one and only appearance. And it's, we're in 1968 now, so this is quite, The Who have been around for a long time and not on the island, which is pretty local for them. And probably the reason was that the promoters up until that point really didn't fancy a mod invasion. It would have been, it would have all kicked off. The Who, this is 1968, so Sell Out was 67, Tommy was 69, so it was a big old night for The Who on the island. And the support act that night were East of Eden. Their violinist was a guy called Dave Arbus, and he's the guy, I think he was a friend of Keith Moon's actually, but having said that, he's the guy that went on to play the violin on The Who's song Bubba O'Reilly from Who's Next in 1971. we've got King Crimson Mark I with Robert Fripp, of course, but also with Greg Lake on bass and vocals. And we've got The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. This was one of the nights, there were a few apparently, where Arthur Brown's thing on his head that was on fire set the curtains off, so a good night for the stagehands that night. It happened quite a few times apparently. This night though, his drummer was a guy called Carl Palmer. Just four for 1969. We're going to start with Yes. It was their one and only appearance on the island. It was around about the time of their debut album release, so it's the original lineup. It was absolutely packed apparently. There were queues around the block, and their fee for the night was £125. Second, Atomic Rooster. Atomic Rooster kind of prog at this point, before Chris Farlow came along and they went rhythm and blues and then kind of hard rock after that. Hawkwind Zoo, who were just about to drop the zoo, part of their name. We're going to finish off 1969 with Wishbone Ash. This is only their second gig, so we're way off the sort of success they had in the early 70s with albums like Argus. We are into 1970, our final year, and we're going to start with Free. Free are a couple of months away from their big hit with All Right Now. It was such a big hit, in fact, that the second gig they booked had after the release of All Right Now, they just couldn't be bothered to go back. So that was that. The Edgar Broughton Band. The Edgar Broughton Band had I think uniquely, had them, Edgar Broughton's mum and dad were their manager and roadie. You Right Heat. This is around the time of the release of their debut album, Very Heavy, Very Humble. Then we got an appearance for Black Sabbath. They come all the way down from the Midlands, and this was about 3 months before their Paranoid single, so not that well known. Well enough though to pack it out. Deep Purple Mark II, so we've got Roger Glover and Ian Gillan. Ritchie Blackmore's guitar lead apparently that night was long enough to get him from the stage all the way to the dressing room, for reasons nobody's really clear about. It was suggested that he had an appointment with one of the fans for something. Nobody really knows exactly why. What the Hoople? This is around about the time of their Mad Shadows album that kind of bombed, despite the fact that they had Guy Stevens producing. They're about 2 years away from David Bowie giving them all the young dudes and kind of rescuing them from oblivion. Genesis, By Demand. Apparently it said on the poster. I don't know how much demand there was. Apparently the fee that night for Genesis was £3. At the time though, this is Genesis Mark I. They're about 4 months away from Phil Collins and a little bit after that Steve Hackett. Taste, fronted by the Irish trio, fronted by Rory Gallagher, of course. 5 encores that night. Would have been one of Taste's final appearances, because later on was their Isle of Wight appearance, and then they split up and Rory Gallagher went solo. Supertramp. This is a very early Supertramp. I think their debut album had just been released, but we're way off of Crime of the Century and Breakfast in America. And then the final gig on the island, it was the 21st of November 1970. The band was called Quintessence. They were kind of an unlikely sounding mix of Asian and prog and jazz and all this kind of stuff. But that was it. That was the last time that a band played on the island. The hotel where all the shows had taken place, or pretty much all the shows had taken place, was now derelict. It was under a demolition order, and then it burnt down. As of now, the island has about 50 homes, and it's got a couple of artist studios and a few boatyards, and it maybe just feels like it was all a bit of a dream, really. That's all very well, unless of course you're a Yes fan, in which case you're thinking, well, you're only thinking two things. Is there a roundabout anywhere near? And is it any good? Well, the answer to both those questions is yes. Let's take a look. Cracking little roundabout, this one, I think. It's got 3 clear exits. It can deal with any kind of vehicle. Look, you've got a 20-foot bus there, and you've got bikes. It's around about 8 foot across, so it's only small, but it really does exactly what you want it to do. I think I'm going to go high on this one. It's going to be a high score, partly because the pub you can see there on the other side of the roundabout, well, in the 70s they used to have folk shows. Folk and blues players used to come down, and one of the guys that used to play there quite a lot was John Martin. High score. I hope you enjoyed our little run around the place, and I'll see you next time.